In preparation for fiberglassing the inside of the boat, I've deviated just a little bit from the instructions that are in the instruction manual from Chesapeake Lightcraft. Right here, you can see the seam between the number 1 planks, which are the big flat planks that are in the bottom, and the first plank up. This is the number 2 plank. This is the area that's going to receive the fiberglass coating of fiberglass cloth. But what I wanted to show you is right in this seam. You can see here, it's kind of hard to get the angle, but this seam is pretty much completely filled in with clear resin. Now this took me about 4 separate applications of resin with sanding in between each one. And you can see right here, this is the remnants of a tape line. So what I have is a very, very smooth transition from the number 2 plank to the number 1 plank, so that the fiberglass cloth will lay smoothly in that joint. Now the factory, Chesapeake Lightcraft, in their instruction manual, recommends using the resin reinforced with the wood putty on this seam. And what you would get is you would get a brown line that would go from the front, from one end to the other end. And I didn't want that to be so apparent. I also didn't want to use epoxy that was thickened with the Cellophyll, because it has a slight cloudy appearance, and I just wanted an absolutely clean seam. So that's why I've chosen to smooth out and taper the edges of this joint between these 2 planks with a clear resin. So you get a seam that's practically invisible and a smooth transition for the fiberglass cloth. In preparation, I'm sanding this coat of resin that I put on the wood. I decided to coat the wood with resin and then sand it smooth so that the fiberglass cloth would lay smoothly on the surface and would be easier to slide around and manipulate. I know that some people say that the fiberglass cloth should be applied directly to the bare wood for better adhesion, but I don't think this is going to be a problem in this case. And again, I will be sanding it completely so that you get a nice mechanical bond between the new resin and the old resin, since it's cured long enough that I can't rely on the chemical bond. So this is the preparation that I'm doing before I start laying the cloth in the bottom of the boat. Well, I'm back with you now. I finished the sanding. I sanded the entire area where the fiberglass cloth is going to be applied. I sanded that all with 220 so that I'll get a good mechanical bond. Also, it's extremely smooth. You can see here that I think I had fairly good luck in smoothing out the fiberglass cloth. I did notice that down here at the ends, looks like right here, I may have to cut a dart to lay it out flat. You'll also notice that I used a little bit of tape to hold up the edges. There were places where I just had a little bit too much material. I do think that my slight deviation from the recommendations in the manual for putting the epoxy down first on the wood before I put the cloth down and extensive sanding, I wound up with a very smooth surface for the cloth, which made it a lot easier to slide the cloth around and try to get the wrinkles out. I think I've done a fairly good job of getting all the wrinkles and bubbles out of the fiberglass cloth, and we'll see as I start putting the resin down. And I'll be back with you in a couple of hours. I'm back with you now again. It's been about 3 hours and 15 minutes since I put the resin on top of the glass cloth, and you can see that it's become virtually clear, which of course is beautiful. and I was able to get the resin down without wrinkling up the cloth too much. I did find I started down at this end, and as I used a scraper and started moving, the cloth actually stretched a little bit and it got a little bit longer down toward that end where I had to cut it. And I did want to show you just one thing here. This was something that was new to me. If you look here, you can see that right here, this is plank number 2. This is the edge where I'm going to be cutting, and you can see that the fiberglass cloth goes up to here, but it's been wetted out and it's bonded. It's starting to bond to the tape that's underneath. So what you want to do is you want to be sure that you cut this seam. You can see right here where I've started cutting this seam. And you want to be sure that the epoxy has set up enough so that it's nice and firm, and when you cut the seam you don't actually pull the epoxy, the fiberglass with the epoxy. You don't want to pull it off the wood, but you also don't want to wait so long that you can't get the tape up. You can see here we can still pull the tape back just like this. So you have to wait long enough until the epoxy sets up to where you can cut the cloth without disrupting it, that it's fully stuck to the wood. But you don't want to wait so long that you can't get the tape up, because if the tape stays bonded to the plywood, you're going to be sandpapering forever. So what I'm going to be doing now is I'm going to be cutting this seam all the way around and pulling the tape off in preparation for the next step. Well, I'm finishing up now. As you can see here, I have cut the edge of the fiberglass on the top of the number 2 plank. I did this with a razor knife. Got a fairly clean cut. The resin has not turned completely to rock. It's pretty solid, but it hasn't turned completely to rock, so I was able to cut right along the edge, and up here also to trim the fiberglass on the edges of the fillets. Just to give you a little bit of a reference, I'm down in my basement and the temperature is 70 degrees. And it's been almost exactly 4 hours since I first mixed up the resin. And I just wanted to mention that time as some kind of a guideline for you, maybe. Because I think if I had waited another 30 minutes, the stuff might have set up to the point where I would have a really hard time separating the fiberglass and getting the tape off and cleaning up the edges. So somewhere around 4 hours at 70 degrees seems to be about the limit on cutting this fiberglass while it's still, as they say, it's called green. So you can cut it, but it doesn't pull off of the wood. And that's about it for today. I hope you've learned a few little tricks. I hope some of this has been helpful to you. I'll be back with another episode in a couple of days. And again, I'll try to finish with just a little bit of musical tribute to the whole boat building process. Thanks again for watching. So long. Today's music is another one of my favorites. A great Jimmy Buffett song called The Captain and the Kid. It reminds me a lot of my own father, who's been gone for many years. He was a pilot and a stockbroker and a boat builder. I think boat building gave him the most satisfaction of anything in his life. Most of what I know I learned from my father, and probably the most important thing was he taught me patience. So this is another one of my favorite songs.
I never used to miss the chance to climb upon his knee and listen to the many tales of life upon the sea. We'd go sailing back on barkentines. We'd talk of things he did. Tomorrow just a day away for the captain and the kid. His world had gone from sailing ships to raking mom's backyard. He never could adjust to land, although he tried so hard. We both were growing older then, and wiser with the years. That's when I came to understand the course his heart still steers. He died about a month ago, while winter filled the air. And though I cried, I was so proud to love a man so rare. He's somewhere on the ocean now, that's where he ought to be, with one hand on the starboard rail, he's waving back at me. I never used to miss the chance to climb up on his knee and listen to the many tales of life upon the sea. We'd go sailing back on barkentines, talk of things he did. The world was just a day away for the captain and the kid. For the captain and this kid.
I hope you enjoyed the song. Again, it's one of my personal favorites. Thanks so much for watching, and until next time, so long.